All right, and picking up where we left off, we're going to focus on biology now, and it's increasingly emphasized in explaining psychological phenomena. The last 4 decades have seen remarkable growth in our understanding of biological bases of mental activity. Three major advances have helped further the scientific understanding of psychological phenomena. These are progress in understanding brain chemistry, developments in neuroscience, and advances in decoding the human genome. We'll start with brain chemistry. Tremendous progress has been made in understanding brain chemistry. Hundreds of substances play critical roles in mental activity and behavior. One such advance is in the field of brain imaging. Since the late 1980s, researchers have been able to study the working brain as it performs its vital psychological functions. Brain imaging methods such as functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, are used. This gets at localization of function. Some brain areas are important for specific feelings, thoughts, and actions. There are many brain regions involved in the brain, and they work together to produce behavior and mental activity. The Human Connectome Project was launched in 2010 as a major international research effort involving collaborators at a number of universities. Scientists have made enormous progress in understanding the human genome. This is the basic genetic code or blueprint for the human body. For psychologists, this map represents the foundational knowledge for studying how specific genes affect thoughts, actions, feelings, and disorders. By identifying the genes underlying mental activity and disorders, researchers may be able to develop therapies based on genetic manipulation. The scientific study of genetic influences has made clear that very few single genes cause specific behaviors themselves. Evolutionary thinking is increasingly influential. As William James and his fellow functionalists knew, the human mind has been shaped by evolution. The field of evolutionary psychology attempts to explain mental traits as products of natural selection. While the brain adapts biologically, some of the contents of the mind adapt to cultural influences. Solving adaptive problems. Evolutionary theory is useful for considering whether behaviors and physical mechanisms are adaptive. Through evolution, specialized mechanisms and adaptive behaviors have been built into our bodies and brains. Adaptive mechanisms enhance our chances of survival. Our evolutionary heritage. Knowledge of the challenges our early ancestors faced helps us understand our current behavior. Modern humans can be traced back 100,000 years. Many of our current behaviors reflect our evolutionary heritage, some of which may now be maladaptive, such as overgeneralized fear. Some behaviors do not reflect our evolutionary heritage, for example, driving, using cell phones, and reading books. Culture provides adaptive solutions. The complexity of living in groups gives rise to culture, and culture's various aspects are transmitted from one generation to the next through learning. Culture affects thought and behavior. For example, music and food preferences, ways of expressing emotion, tolerance of body odors. Human cultural evolution has occurred much faster than human biological evolution. Cultural rules reflect adaptive solutions worked out by previous generations. Cultural rules are learned as norms. Here's an example of cultural differences. In the picture on the upper left, Westerners tend to be independent and autonomous, stressing their individuality. In the picture on the bottom right, Easterners, such as this Cambodian family, tend to be more interdependent, stressing their sense of being part of a collective. Psychology science now crosses levels of analysis. There are 4 broadly defined levels of analysis that reflect the most common research methods for studying mind and behavior. These are biological, individual, social, and cultural. An example is listening to music can be studied at all of these levels. It has an effect on you biologically. You individually assess it. There's social norms and cultural influences. Here's a chart of the levels of analysis to help bring that information together and what is studied for it. This is also in your book. Your brain on music. The researcher, Peter Yanata, played familiar and unfamiliar music to study participants. As shown here, many regions of the brain were activated by the music. Activity in green indicates familiarity with the music. Activity in blue indicates emotional reactions to the music. And activity in red indicates memories from the past. The yellow section in the frontal lobe links together familiar music, emotions, and memories. This area is active, for example, if you have a fond memory associated with the song. Subfields in psychology focus on different levels of analysis. Psychologists work in many different settings. The setting often depends on whether the psychologist's primary focus is on research, teaching, or applying scientific findings to improving the quality of daily living. A scientist will choose to study at a particular level of analysis, or more than one level, based on his or her research interests, general theoretical approaches, and training. Employment settings for psychologists. Some of you might be interested in this chart. Breaks down what you can do with a degree in psychology. So the red represents university, 4-year college, so that is a teacher at a university. Light blue is at a medical school. It's also a field of school psychology. You can enter into an independent practice. You could work at a hospital or another health service. Purple represents government, such as working at the VA, and also regular business or nonprofit. All right, subfields focus on the levels analysis are examples of some of the popular subfields. There's biological psychologists, cognitive psychologists, also neuroscientists. There are developmental psychologists, personality psychologists, social psychologists, cultural psychologists, the clinical, and industrial organizational psychologists. If you have questions about any of these fields, remember to go over to the discussion board and ask me questions there. Here's a chart from the book that breaks each of these down. It gives their research interests and sample research questions. This information is also available in the book. Will psychology benefit you in your career? Many careers involve interacting with coworkers, customers, clients, or patients. So it is likely that it will help you in many careers. Studying psychology develops interpersonal skills. Dealing with other people is an important part of most careers. In the picture in the upper left, a medical professional needs to gauge people's moods and their motivations in order to help them recover. Picture in the upper right, teachers need to understand people's behavior and how people learn in order to help them learn as best they can. The picture on the bottom, in order to convince people to buy products, salespeople need to understand the relationship between motivation and emotion. And thus concludes the lecture for Chapter 1, Introduction to Psychology.